Hi. I've been building bowls for quite a long time, and I thought I'd like to share a few of the things I've learned with you. Now take a look at some of the samples I have made. You'll notice that there's black walnut and black cherry and mahogany, and there's ebony in there, white ash, oak. And even though I've built over 500 bowls, I have not yet had to purchase one piece of wood. My wood all comes from local woodworking shops from their scrap bins. So I would suggest you go online and look up kitchen cabinet companies, stair building companies. Hardwood flooring installers is a great place to get wood. They have a ton of scraps left over when they're finished the floor. And my nephew Aaron tells me that he's getting wood from packing crates at work. Another good place for work for wood. Anyway, there's no problem finding free wood. So let's get started. The first thing you need to do is cut 16 of these wedges. And to cut them, you need a pattern. So take a piece of wood that's 4 inches long, draw a center line on it, and from the center go each way at the top 1.25 inches, at the bottom go 1/2 inch, and then join those lines up. Now take your time cutting this out. You need this very, very accurate. And when you're marking your wood, make sure the grain runs this way. Otherwise your bowl will look very funny. Now here is the size of some of the scraps that I'm getting. As you can see, they're not very big. So lay your pattern on there and start marking it out. Do one like that and then flip it over. And when you flip it over, just leave enough room in between them for a bandsaw to go down there. So I'm going to go and cut those out, and I'll be right back. Okay, we'll cut a couple of these out. I'm putting these in the microwave. You may not need to do this step, but my shop is down here in the basement of my garage and it's a little bit damp. So I put it in there for 1 minute. Now be careful you don't leave your wood in there too long because it will start on fire. I know that for a fact. Now something else, I have put green wood in there, and after about 15 minutes, 1 minute at a time, let it cool down in between, I've had green wood down to 11% moisture, and I'm able to work with it. So one more thing, don't leave it in there very long, but if your shop is in a basement someplace where it's damp, I strongly suggest you do this. This sled is probably the most important part of your entire project. It cuts your wedges out perfectly. You take a piece of plywood, roughly 18 by 12, and you fasten these two runners to it so they will run along your table guides, like so. And then to position this fence, take this same pattern you used a minute ago, put it next to the fence and next to the blade, and nail this fence down. Now of course, be careful you don't have the saw running when this is happening. Do the same thing on the other side. Okay, and that positions that. Now, a friend of mine, Frank, told me to put those two screws in there, and I can make this an awful lot more accurate. And here's how they work. When you have your 16 wedges all cut, and let's suppose there's a tiny space in the bottom end, you need to add more wood here. So take this screw and turn it in 1/8 of a turn. Now why only an eighth? Because you're adding wood to 16 pieces. The same thing here, if it's open on the top end, like so, then you turn the top screw in an eighth of a turn, and that adds a tiny bit of wood to each wedge. Take your wedges that you've already dried out, put an X on one side of them all, and that X will stay up all the time you're going to work on it. You'll need to adjust this bottom screw here. You won't like to get this right the first time around. You'll need to adjust that up or down until you're actually cutting some wood off of here. So I'm going to start cutting some. One more thing, my fingers are very, very dry, and I can't move that wood very well with them. So you wet your finger, and now you can move the wood any place you like. So wet your fingers, hold it in nice and tight to that fence. I'm going to use black walnut as my accent wood. Make sure it's planed to the same thickness as your wedges. Set your fence to whatever thickness you want that wedge to be. Get a push stick. Now I'm going to push the push stick right over top of the blade. Alright, right clean through. Whatever you do, do not pull it back halfway through. Run it right through. Otherwise you're going to hurt yourself. In case you want your accent strips to be thinner, and you can't cut them any thinner the other way that I showed you, you can cut them thinner this way. Set how thick you want them, okay, on this side of the blade, now the left hand side of the blade, and put this stop here, and then we're going to cut one. Undo your fence. Bring it over to the stop, lock it, and cut another one. And just keep on doing that. Okay, we have these laid out. Notice the X's are all on the top. The reason we do that is because if the sled is out a tiny bit, and I have one of these turned over, they're not going to fit properly. So now, I know there's a left and a right on every one of these cuts. The glue I use is Tight Bond number 3. It's a very, very powerful glue, and I have had good success with that. So you pick up the wedges. It's easier to glue the wedges than it is the accent pieces, and glue both sides of it. Put a nice bit of glue on there. Work your way around. Don't do what I did once, forget to do one side. If you do that, your bowl falls apart. So just keep working your way around and glue all of these wedges. Alright, I have all these glued up, and now it's time to clamp them. I'm going to use a gear clamp to squeeze them together. Make sure all of your accent pieces are shoved to the outside. And I like to run that gear clamp in with a cordless drill. before I put the last bit of pressure on there, I'm going to put some weight on it. And I like using bottles of sand for that. That holds it down in place, and then I'm going to finish tightening it. You notice I'm using newspaper here, because I don't want this thing to stick to my workbench. Okay, that's good. I'll just put that to one side and let it cook for a day. Alright, my wedges are all glued up. It's time to cut them out. I always make 11-inch bowls because that's how big my planer or my lathe will turn. So I'm going to cut this out at 11 inches. Alright, I'll go and cut that out, and I'll be right back. Once you've got this cut out, now you need to plane it down. So my 12-inch planer here will do a nice job on this. Take tiny cuts each time. Do not get greedy on this. Take as tiny a cut as you possibly can. Okay, there we have that all done. Now we'll move on to our next step. The next step is to make the outside wall of your bowl. Now if you want to put different colors of wood in that wall, I would suggest you glue them together ahead of time, because they're very difficult to work with in these tiny pieces. So I've glued some white ash with some black walnut. Let's go and cut these out. You only need 8 of these. And you need these cut at 22.5 degrees. Now I have this saw designated for 22.5 degrees. And that's all it ever cuts is these bowls. So make one cut. Now turn your piece of wood over and measure 4 7/8 from long side to long side and put a nail in there, and that's your stop. So all the pieces are going to be cut at 4 7/8. Again, just turn your piece over and keep on going till you have 8 pieces cut. Okay, when you got these all cut, just knock the whiskers off them so it doesn't get in your glue. Okie dokie. Alright, we're going to put glue on both ends of every other piece. That's a lot faster and gluing one end of each piece. And again, of course, make sure you don't miss one of the ends. Okay, we'll put our gear clamp on here, tighten it down a little bit. And before you get it completely tight, tap all your joints perfectly smooth. And then finish it out. Okay, we'll put that away and let that cook for 24 hours. It's time to glue my base onto the bowl bottom. My large face plates will not turn something this small, but my small face plate only has 3 holes in it, which is not enough screws to screw to here. So what I did is I bolted a piece of maple onto the face plate. I put it back on the lathe and I turned it completely round. And now I'm able to put 5 screws in here. And 5 screws is plenty to hold on my base. The reason I have to do the base ahead of time is my lathe is so small that I can't get the tool rest around behind the lathe to turn it. So I've turned my base separately, and I'm going to fasten it on after the fact. Now I told you I only build 11-inch bowls. So to center my base, I've made up this donut. This donut is 11 inches in diameter, and that's exactly how big my bowl is. I simply drop my base in there, and that automatically centers it for me. Now, put a line around there, and that's where my glue is going to go. However, once you glue that, this base is going to slide on the glue because the glue is wet. So I take 3 1-inch finishing nails and I just tap them in on that line. And that will prevent the bottom from sliding around on me. Okay, now we're going to put glue on there. Keep the glue back from the line just a little bit. And then when it oozes, it won't ooze out past the line and you won't have to deal with it afterwards. Don't skimp on the glue here. There isn't much of a glue base here, so you don't want to have a glue-starved joint here. Okay, that's good. Now put that back in again. Now this is almost impossible to clamp here with ordinary clamps, so what I did, take a piece of wood, drill a hole in it large enough to allow your faceplate to go through. Put that on there like so, and then take your bottles of sand, put them on there, and they will act as a clamp. Okay, we'll let that cook for 24 hours, and then we'll go on to the next step. Our next step is to glue the bowl sides to the base. Now after you've glued this up, your joints might be a tiny bit out, so I would suggest you plane them, but again, plane the tiniest little bit off of just one side. Just take a very, very thin cut. And then we'll glue this up. I've never had a glue joint fail using this new type of glue here, Type Bond number 3. Move it around a bit, get that glue nice and evenly spread out, and then clamp it. Put a bit of weight on, put a pressure on that side, a bit more pressure on here. That's good. Now go back and put lots of pressure on there. Okay, that's good. We'll let that set for 24 hours. And then we'll go on to our next step. Alright, it's time to start turning this bowl. And the first tool I'm going to use on the outside is a skew that I have ground down to 90 degrees here. And I'm only going to cut with that little point right there. This edge simply rides along the bowl but doesn't do any cutting. The next tool is a homemade tool. You can turn the handle on the lathe, go to a machine shop, you can pick up a piece of 5/8 rod, and then you simply sharpen it. This is a very, very handy tool. My son-in-law, Jeff, made this up for me. It's a tool rest that goes right in to the bottom of your bowl, like so. It's a very, very handy tool. I strongly suggest you have one made up for yourself. And the last thing I want to show you is a depth gauge. Again, it's a homemade depth gauge, and you put that in the bowl, and you can tell out here how thick the walls of your bowl are. I usually don't go down much below 3/8 of an inch on my thickness. And you can check it regularly with this bowl gauge. I'm going to make one cut here, and then I'm going to show you how this tool here works. Everything's nice and tight. So notice that I'm cutting just on that leading edge. If you have to push really hard on your chisel, then it's not sharp enough. Alright, let's turn down the inside of this bowl. And this is where you're going to find this tool rest handy, and this great big chisel really handy. Okay, I'll finish that out later, but I want to show you how handy this is to have this other tool rest here. It sits up right tight to the bottom of the bowl. Okay, I'll turn that out later, but now I want to show you how to sand it. Alright, I have the bowl turned, and now it's time to sand it. I have found that using this sander, this orbital sander, does a really good job on the bowl, and it doesn't leave any sanding lines. You use it with the lathe turned on. Okay, once you've got the thing sanded to your satisfaction, it's time to finish it. I put on 2 coats of linseed oil mixed with an odorless paint thinner, and I let that sit on there for just about 3 or 4 minutes, and then I wipe it off. I wait for about 15 minutes and I put another coat on. And then the next day I apply a coat of urethane. The next day I sand that with very, very fine sandpaper. I put on another coat, and I may put on 4 or 5 coats of urethane. And when that's perfectly dry, I sand it again, and I put on a clear coat of paste wax. I put that on with 4-0 steel wool, and I polish it with an old t-shirt. And that's finished. Okay, one more step to go, and we're done. Now, I like to put a message on my bowls, and it doubles as a means of covering up these holes I have in here. And the message I like to use is from the Bible, John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life. And here's how you put that on there. Take some glue, just as a thin layer of glue. You don't need very much to hold it on. And you'll notice I'm brushing the brush off the edges. So that means I'm not going to get any glue on the outside of my bowl. Very, very thin layer of glue. Center your message on there. You can see it by patting down the outside edges, and make sure you have it well smoothed out, just like you were laying wallpaper. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now take some sandpaper and only brush down. Okay, that looks pretty good. Pull that off, and there you have your bowl, all finished. Now folks, before I sign off, there's one more thing I want to talk about. If you've been watching the news lately, you realize that our world is in a serious crisis. It's falling apart. But did you know that the Bible prophesied this would happen over 2,000 years ago? And it also says that these kind of things are going to happen just before Christ's second coming. That being the case, the question is, are you prepared to meet him when he comes back? If not, here's what you have to do. The first thing is you have to admit that you're a sinner. And And when I examine my life, I certainly have no problem admitting that I am a sinner. The next thing you must do is ask Jesus to forgive you for those sins. And then you have to repent. Repent simply means you turn away from those sins, you stop doing them. You can't do this on your own. You will need Jesus' help. And the final thing you have to do is ask Jesus to be the Lord of your life. That simply means let Him take your life over and guide it from here on in. Folks, thank you for watching my video. We'll see you next time.